Hello and welcome everybody for joining us here on this Thwack Livecast session. This is for an IT journey to monitoring glory. This is session 3. We had 2 previous sessions. The link up above where you're watching this is where you can watch those again after the live event, obviously. If you are not logged into Thwack, please click sign in up at the top so you can actually join the chat so we can get questions from you and feedback directly live. Today is all about the importance of sharing pretty things, and with me I have some special guests. We have Crystal again. Hello, Crystal.
Hello.
And from the other side of the pond we have Tony Johnson. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, Crystal.
So we're going to talk about pretty things, and we're not just talking about ourselves here because honestly we don't think that way, but it's really about getting the information in front of people the way they what they need and how they want to perceive it. And a lot of that discussion comes in with kind of dashboarding and alerting and things like that, stuff we've talked about before. So if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat. We will attempt to answer all of them live as much as possible. Quick recap, not going to spend a lot of time on it. Our first session was back to the monitoring basics where we talked about, the monitoring protocols, the types of ways whether or not your system send information to your monitoring system or whether your monitoring system goes out and pulls information from your organization. The fact that monitoring is 100% not alerting. People get them confused. They're not the same. Please go back and watch that to explain it. And then we talk about customizing out of the box and how to show value quickly in your monitoring solution. Again, you can see this on thwack.com/livecast whenever this page refreshes, probably later today. Part 2, we talked about data normalization and why it's important, and we talked here about welcoming scope. I saw the chuckle, Crystal. It's that great. It's the point picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about scope creep and how it's actually a good thing for monitoring, because you may start by watching just kind of this small area, and then people ask you to watch this, and then this, and then this. And it could be people that start monitoring networks and then monitor servers and systems after that, or people that go the other way, or maybe they start with databases and then they need to monitor the underlying architecture below that. But you want that so you can get all that information in one space and look at it and understand it. We also talked briefly near the end about how you can kind of take some of the methods from the agile software development methodology and use them in an iterative way to make sure that you're giving the people the information they need so they can be actionable. And that takes us to today. Today, I think the big question, and this was something I dealt with, is why bother customizing? Out of the box is fine. It has all the information, and it's an argument I used to have a lot. We're going to touch on some of the ways you can go beyond the basics. We're going to touch about how you can use the SolarWinds query language, how we're going to show you how to build your own first custom widget, and we're going to talk about building reports, and then how to empower others to do this work themselves with some of the, I'm going to say recent additions, like in the last year or so, some of the more recent additions to the Orion platform. But first I want to open this up, and if you're on the live chat, let me know, what do you think of this dashboard? And Crystal, Tony, give me your completely fair distinction on this dashboard.
Well, I'm struggling to interpret what I'm seeing right away. Looks busy, but it's so-so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not telling you anything. Who's looking at this?
Yeah.
I'm learning nothing from this. What is this going to do for me? Nothing. Maybe that top left widget is useful, but outside of that, it's not customized in any way. So who's looking at this? Maybe an Orion administrator, in which case they're just trying to see that things work. That's about it. It's way too general.
Yeah, it's got a ton of information on it at the same time for anyone who's down in the weeds looking at performance or investigating an issue. But as a dashboard, probably not very suitable.
I mean, I'm struggling to come up even with a theme. The closest, like if I look at the right-hand side here, the theme I get is interfaces, and even the second column. And then if I look at the left-hand column, I maybe get kind of nodes, but it's not just nodes, it's nodes and applications, and response time, which is more of a network thing than we said we were going to show you dashboards. We're not going to show you necessarily good dashboards. Sometimes it takes building a bad dashboard, and we've all seen them, to say, that's not what I want. The good thing about this dashboard is there's plenty of data. There's absolute ton of data, which is great. That we're using the top XX resources instead of showing everything. So you already have kind of a summary view. Great. Each widget independently makes sense. The problem is, although there's plenty of data, there's just too much. You can't work with it. It's, Crystal, to steal what you said, it's not telling a story. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what you do when you look at monitoring, because you're looking at a holistic view of an infrastructure. And no story, no frame of reference. I don't know what are you showing me? What does red in column 3 widget 4 mean compared to, yellow in not great. And for me, I don't like pie charts. Sorry, personal preference. That's my line there. It says the ugly is pie charts. And
it is an ugly dashboard though. It's not meant to look good. The data is not functionally it's not functionally telling a story. So you have too much information. If I was a regular user, this dashboard would be like, I would look at that and go, nah, this doesn't tell me anything. I can't use this. This monitoring solution is no good. That's the conclusions. That's the leap that they go to. This is what you presented me with. This does not give me what I need. I'm out.
Yeah. Tony, imagine that you got an email saying that your server is having problems, and that's the dashboard you landed on when you clicked show me more details. Can you just...
I'm more confused than I was before I got the email.
Yeah, exactly. And that's never a good way to actually interact with any of your NMS systems. It depends on who needs what. And I mean, I threw out a couple examples here. I know there's a couple places I'm missing that you guys have mentioned before. Obviously, the monitoring engineer needs everything, and the support desk needs only kind of like this tiny little bit, like here's the problems and here's the current alerts. But there's other spaces here, and maybe you need one that's, and we totally joke about the CIO/CTO dashboard. That is the one green button that isn't actually linked to anything, that is literally like a static JPEG image of a green button that just says, everything's great.
Yeah, that is definitely the joke. I think most frequently when people are building dashboards, they're building them for a specific purpose. So it's usually for a certain team, or maybe even geographically separating things. So you've got, North America and you've got an APAC team or whatever. But typically, I think that is where most things fall. As monitoring engineers, we build them for ourselves, which means that a lot of times the information that we build for someone else is not what they're looking for. It's not what they wanted, because we're thinking about building it for ourselves and not for someone else.
Yeah. And Tony, I know working with Orion as a PM, you've had this discussion with oodles of customers, how the initial experience is not always the best. It gives you tons of information, but it's not, I'm going to use the word succinct. Do you think that's a correct word?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's the very reason custom properties exist in the first place, right? We can provide you with a ton of valuable information out of the box, report on status and availability easily, but building up that picture of mapping your systems and applications to your specific environment and taking your monitoring and data presentation to the next level is all about customization.
Yeah, it's like, I've heard customers say it loads of times, like it's like drinking from a fire hose. A dashboard like that is just like everything all at once, right? So you're finding what you need. It's not easy to get to what you want from something like that. So the customization is and we will say long live custom properties all the time. It makes everything so much easier to customize, as long as you're intentional and thoughtful with your custom properties.
That is it 100%. The number of persons I have encountered who set up custom properties on day 0 and then 6 months later are like, I need to rename all of these. Like, that is non-trivial if you've already built alerts and reports and widgets and everything else that are based off those. I was like, okay, well, can I copy that? Well, of course you can copy them. It's an export and an import. But then they're disconnected. And it's like, maybe you just need to have a long conversation with how you intend to use these, and not just you as the monitoring engineer, which is incredibly important because you use them in alerts, you use them in reports, you use them in your custom widgets and your dashboards. Great. But with the teams that matter, like Do you really need production versus staging if you never monitor staging? Is that an unnecessary thing? Can you just get rid of that? Or maybe you have a separate dev system that just watches staging, and that's where you test new bits and stuff. God, I feel like we could have one of these conversations just about cool things to do with custom properties. But that'll take away from today.
We did just have a whole conversation about the conversation in our Scope Creep live cast. So if you missed that, and we're very passionate about it, have those conversations. I know it's uncomfortable. It takes time. Nobody really enjoys it. But you'll get more bang for your buck, and everyone will be happier with your monitoring system if you have the conversations and you allow them to tell you, you know what, that's not what I was really looking for. I need this instead, and then go build it for them. You'll be happier in the end.
Yeah. And some of that we're trying to get rid of. And that's kind of here. And this is the first stage of going beyond the box, because Orion admins, and I use admins in quotes because it's edit view, manage view. Thank you. I can never remember the actual word we use in the console that says this gives you the rights to play with stuff. They're the only ones that can actually design classic dashboards and add and remove widgets. So for the longest time, probably for the past 15 years, roughly, like since Orion went web, it was the Orion admin's job, or someone with that view management right, it was their job to build dashboards and then have that loop with someone be like, is this right? No. What do you need? Is this right? No. What do you need? And you have to have that, which is great because you learn more about the way they're going to interpret the data, so you can actually help craft alerts and all the displays better. But it's a big time suck. And we've tried to make changes.
And you have to be careful about who you gave those managed view rights to, because they're the same across the dashboard.
Yeah.
They're the same across the whole thing. So, how many times did I talk to people who are like, oh, my nodes page changed. Where is the data that was on my nodes page? Well, somebody took it out. Somebody took those resources out. They thought, hey, I'll just edit this node page and it'll show what I want for my stuff. But little do they know, it changed it for everyone.
Yep.
Yeah. It's many, many years ago, this was I'm not going to say it was a prevalent problem, but I remember it being a problem that there was a KB article of how to reset everything back to default. There probably still is, but in those days it was like run an executable and then a batch file and then the SQL script and then rerun it's probably easier now, but it was a problem. I know my manager did it because he was the one who originally set up the system. And then this is an exact example. Node details was the same for all of our Cisco gear, our router switches, and for our servers. And he said, I don't need these things on this page. So he took them all off of that page, and all of a sudden, all of those metrics I wanted and all of those widgets I wanted on my server pages were just gone.
Yeah.
And the only way I knew is I had to go through the admin log and be like, what'd you do? Or the audit log. And be like, tell me what you did so I can undo that.
There's certainly ways around that with the views. There's certainly ways around that, creating different nodes pages and assigning them for device type and that kind of stuff. There's certainly ways around that. But if you give out those managed view rights to loads of people and you don't give them some kind of warnings or training or whatever, then they don't know and they make those mistakes. And I mean, I'm sure that everyone has made a mistake in their time. There's nothing wrong with it. But I mean, for sure, when I first learned how to use the Orion platform, I definitely did that. And everyone went, wait, where did it go? What happened? And you have to go resolve it.
Yeah. But we're trying to make that less cumbersome by giving people the ability to build their own maps and build their own dashboards. And the nice thing about the dashboards is, well, we'll dig into them, but the dashboards they're essentially wizard based as far as I'm concerned. It's like select the kind of type and then go through and you click done. Hey, we're all happy. So where do we go from here? Oh, super easiest thing you can possibly do if you're using custom properties, and you don't have to use custom properties, but you can filter existing widgets. This is great. You hit the edit in the corner, you hit the edit again, you duplicate it, duplicate the widget, then save it, then edit one of them to make sure you get what you want. And then if you're happy, you can delete the other one off the page. It just works. It's easy. If you want to see nodes that have problems, status is not one. Done. And then all of a sudden you see it. What that actually looks like is, go ahead. So if I pick something here, and we'll just say, this is the one I'm picking on today, manage nodes. So right now it's filtering off anything that's unmanaged. And then here's some filters. So yeah, only show things that are not up. I mean, and we give you pretty clear examples here. But if you really want to blow your mind, you can expand this list of node properties.
Oh, wait, there's more.
this does change depending on the version you're running, the products you have installed, and your custom property list. It is not. There's probably 60 things in here, but I do like that we've got some examples like only show devices, so you kind of understand the way that the
syntax.
The syntax. Thank you. Word not come like. Kevin. So that's the simple one. Then we have when you're ready to go and look into really building custom stuff. You don't necessarily need to install SWCL Studio. You don't need to write stuff in a scripting language. You can actually do it right in the web pages. This is a hidden web page. When I say hidden, it's there. It's not like it's blocked. You do need to be an admin, obviously, /admin. But you can go to this right now on your environment. And if we go here.
And by hidden, I think that mainly you mean that there's not a link to it anywhere. You have to know the URL.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the advanced configuration. There are several pages that are just not in the main navigation for reasons.
And it is only accessible by administrators. I do need to point that out. I also wanted to point out that this not only helps you by showing you kind of the configurations of the tables in SWCL so that you don't have to build from scratch, but you don't have to install anything. So if you're in an environment where you can't install anything or you can't access the box that has SWCL Studio on it or whatever the reason is, and you need to check something real quick, this is a good option.
Yeah. And I know we've run into this frequently. I know, Tony, you and I have answered questions in the SDK forum a lot. And it's my mistake, I keep forgetting about this page. And you reminded someone not too long ago who were like, I can't install software on that server. I know you've sent people here. Would you generally encourage people just to kind of kick the tires here, or are there some gotchas?
Well, there's certainly some gotchas in terms of it's an extensive list of entities that are available in the drop-down. It might not be immediately apparent what they are, but one of the nuances of SWCL is that you can't select star. You have to define each column. So here it's really easy. You select your entity, generate your query, and it's going to name every column that's available for you to peruse and identify information of interest.
Yeah. And let me see if I can actually get this to execute. I'm probably not going to get lucky on one of these. So, no, you know what? I bet my lab timed out. That's what happens when we do these things live.
Yep.
Now I feel the need to do this. And I'm going to make everyone just suffer through it for a hot second.
Most of the entities are relatively intuitive. If you look at nodes, volumes, interfaces, applications, groups, you'll notice containers, but that's a very large list of all types of data that you can query via API using a custom resource, using a custom report, or even an alert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and don't forget, it does not clear the previous query.
Yep, I've been burned. And it does not automatically put in top. And now, because it's bringing back a million things, it's probably still going to run slow. Live lab.
And top does work there. I believe there are other verbs like distinct and things like that work in SWCL. There's a full list on GitHub. I know that.
Yeah.
This is. I mean, it's a very useful resource as a quick reference. Yep. Right? There are other ways to query data, like SWCL Studio is my preference. But as you stated, if you're in an environment where you can't install additional software, or you're just working quickly to validate a query, that URL you can't navigate to it. You have to know about it. As you said, it's not that it's hidden or locked down in any way, but a very handy first step to validate a query.
Okay.
I will say also, it is not fun to build a SWGL query in there. So if you're building one that you're trying to join tables together or pull things together from different places or anything like that, it's a bit of a pain to build it there. So I would say like this is either you're just checking to see how something is going to return, or you're trying to familiarize yourself with the tables, or if you're in an environment where you can't download new software, then this is where you go. Yeah. Otherwise, I would suggest the alternative, the better alternative, which is SWGL Studio.
Yeah, and for me, SWGL Studio became a part of my day-to-day journey probably, I'm going to say about 3 years ago, give or take, where I don't want to say I discovered it, but I was reintroduced to it, and I realized all the kind of little small features, the incremental features that were added, like the search, the name of the related tables and navigation properties, stuff like that. All right, we'll get into that. SWGL Studio. If you don't know what we're talking about, this is SWGL Studio. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's hosted on GitHub. It is completely public. We encourage people, if you happen to be a coder and you want to contribute to it, you're more than welcome to do so. It's just an MSI file you download and install. Right here, I've already done that and skipped it, and I've already connected. So, and this is what it looks like. And for the navigation, we have basically a huge tree view for your lists. We've got query tabs. We've got your results pane. And since I ran top 100 on that one, I'll run it here as well. All right, so it wasn't so much that the page wasn't loading, it's that my server's a little overtaxed right now. So hopefully we'll get this.
It's okay. Back. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, and this also takes. I have frequently found like the second time I run a query, at least in like a specific session, it's much faster. I think it's probably using some caching, or we're probably relying on the SQL Server to do some of its indexing as well. There we go. So yeah.
So this looks very familiar to anyone who's written queries in SQL Management Studio.
Yeah,
it's not a world away from it, right?
Yeah, and we won't go into all the nuance of the language. There are resources. GitHub has a fantastic wiki, gives you examples of the functions you can use and the way you can do some clever things with it. I specifically like date trunk. It's incredibly interesting for slicing and dicing data. I still have to look it up every time because it's powerful, but it does things in a way that, although intuitive, is not the way that my mind wants it to work. So I always have to double check. So yeah, you have basically your navigator.
If you're familiar with SQL already, I will say it is an easy transition to make to SWGL, but some functions do not operate in SWGL. So, go familiarize yourself with the functions page. That list is really handy to bookmark if you're going to be working in SWGL at any amount of time.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing that I didn't put on this slide, but I want to call out is down here buried under the results area. So you have the server name, you have the user currently logged in, you have the execution time and the number of rows returned. This is actually really helpful if you're dealing with incredibly large data sets, and a lot of times for me, things that cross where I have to use joins, where I can't use navigation properties. And sometimes knowing that I'm getting 1,000 rows back, but it's taking 1 minute and 18 seconds. Maybe I need to find a better way to get that data.
Yeah.
Maybe refactor that query. Let's see. I do want to call out the search because I think it's one of my favorite things that has ever been added. If I need to worry about agents, I type agent. And then I wait. And Cirrus nodes, a bunch of the core tech stuff, and then the agent management stuff will down there. Orion agent management, including how to add agent, adding passive agent. Just being able to search for that searches not only for the kind of the top level detail, the entity information, but also the fields and also the verbs that you can act on these is honestly one of my favorite parts about it.
Yeah, and the SWGL Studio goes beyond just querying data for dashboards, right? It's a powerful tool. You mentioned a few things like navigation properties, verbs. those things are not really important in the construct of creating a dashboard. But I think one of the links that we've shared or will share towards the end is the introduction to the Orion API 101 article on TWAC, which describes water navigation properties, what those verbs are, but as a means of constructing a query with some nice syntax highlighting, and as you show the ability to show the number of rows returned and the time taken to execute. SWCL Studio is above just that URL that we showed in the previous example.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And I see we got some people answering with links. Thank you very much. So if we look at all of the things, you have the server at the top level. You can connect to multiple servers. If you have multiple servers, most people only have one. You have the namespace, which is essentially like a collection. And I don't mean a programming collection. I mean like a logical collection of types of entities. And we use the phrase table/entities because if you're from the databasing world, you think of them as tables. But since it's technically an API, they're actually entities. Then you have the properties. You have some inherited properties, things they get basically from other parts of the system. Then you have the navigational properties or the navigation links. Those are amazing. I could talk about them for an hour.
Yep.
And still not have enough time to cover them. It's something, if you haven't looked at, there will be resources. Just try a simple one. And then the verbs. And the verbs basically do your actions for you. But Tony's right. As far as just kind of pulling data to build something pretty, we're not going to need verbs. You can use the navigation links, but we're probably going to just stay with the regular properties for one of these table or entities. Yeah. But now seems a good time to check the chat. Survey says.
We did have someone ask for the link, but MVP Mark Roberts did share the link to the Swiss.aspx page. So that is the correct URL for anyone who's looking for it, the one that he shared in the chat. Other than that, it looks like they've been sharing some links. So unless anyone chimes in with anything soon, I think we're good to continue.
Okay. One thing that we haven't said is if you have questions about using SWCL Studio, there's a lot of resources online already for how to do it. But if you're trying to write a query and you're just not quite getting how to do the connection, go to the Orion SDK forum on THWAC. It's just go to THWAC, product forums, Orion SDK, and feel free to ask a question in that forum. I know Tony, myself, probably a dozen other people are subscribed, and we just try to answer those questions as quickly as Crystal's smiling. Are you subscribed?
No, I'm not subscribed to that one.
No, you're on the reports one though, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And all of that leads us to building your very first widget. This is an incredibly boring one. It's boring by intention because we just want to show you the very basics of kind of getting this stuff started. But I can see this may be useful in an environment where you need to restart servers, maybe not 30 days, but maybe you need to restart them every 90 days for patch management or something like that. So it could tell an interesting story. I
just want to say that as an Orion administrator for a decade, I will tell you that when this widget came out, I was so excited to use it because it is incredible. Now, previously there was, and there still is, a custom SQL widget that you can run custom SQL queries to return results, but it's not dynamic. It doesn't do paging on there. It doesn't do search. It doesn't do the linking very easily or well. And this thing does so much. It's beautiful and wonderful. It looks pretty. Importantly, it looks pretty. And I will say that the custom SQL one does not look pretty. So this is like 1,000 times better.
Definitely. Kevin, you say it's not terribly exciting. I find it very exciting. It's one of my favorite widgets to go and get a challenge from THWAC, craft a query, make it look pretty.
It actually is some of my favorite things to do. That's what this widget is.
All right, fine. I defer. It is exciting and pretty. But it's built off really one of the simplest and if you have pretty much any of the products on the Orion platform, you should be able to probably run this query and get results. Now, this is the same thing we ran on the web and the same thing I ran in Swickle Studio. It's just been shortened because we don't need all the fields. But you know, the node ID, everyone's familiar with that. It goes at the end of the URL when you click on a details page. The IP address, probably important for most. Caption is the actual name of it. Description normally is like some type of vendor ID that comes in, the vendor thereof. The status, which is a numerical value, which if you feel like being crazy, you can go and look at orion.statusinfo. There are way more status objects in there than you think, but it's something very interesting to look at. And for this one, since we're kind of talking about like the last time it booted and it had been online, it's like, what's the last boot? And then also I want the details URL so I can craft a link at some point. This is simple. Everyone who has an Orion system right now, you can go to that /orion/admin/swiss.aspx. You can copy and paste this right in and get results. I'm not going to do it there. I'm going to do it in Swickle Studio. And I did put aliases in here because this is my personal best practice, because I find it helps. And I realize this might be a little small, so I'm going to go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit here. Hopefully that's a little more legible for people. But that's it. And you'll see that this is built. I mean, Tony, how close are we to the actual official T-SQL language? We're pretty darn close.
Pretty close. There's certainly a lot of functions that we have. There are some missing. You know, there are ways around those. Strings to integers, recent example there that you've been participating on. But yeah, certainly very close. Not to go too off course, but those navigation properties, as you said, we could probably talk about an hour on those alone.
You telling me I don't have to do joins by hand anymore?
There you go. Exactly.
You had me at no joins. That was
I will say that was an adjustment coming from writing all my queries in SQL to not. I'm like, wait, your brain automatically goes to do the joins, and then you're like, oh, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that.
Yeah. We had one recently that I answered in the SDK forum that they were looking essentially for the equivalent of, I guess it's the pivot command in T-SQL.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, we don't have that. It's like, but you can just do that with a series of very simple joins. You know, just the length of the query changes based on how many fields you want to bring in. None of it is difficult, and it's easy to comprehend if it's written well. And I say if it's written well, and that's one of the reasons I always try to use aliases whenever I share something on Thwack so people understand what I'm going for here.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, it should be best practice anyway. I mean, what are the odds that you're going to be the guy looking at this query again in 2 years? Maybe, but are you going to remember why you built it when you have to edit it later? You're going to remember what it's doing? Maybe, be kind to future you, or also, future administrators or whoever is looking at these queries. Be kind.
There, I just showed you the best thing. It supports the double dash for comments. Use the double dash.
When you come back to that, as you said, Chris, that in 2 years and you copy and paste it, you need to know what your original intent was.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you built it for somebody, also put in a comment of who and why you built that for. Someone will thank you later when you have to go back and be like, what the heck was this? Why did I do it? Who's it for? Who's using this? And then you can go back to that person and say, hey, do you still need this?
You'll save yourself a world of error messages. Can't find table, multiple references. We won't go down there, but simple rule. And use aliases.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to point out here, and I know we've said it in other places, but I want to make sure it's said here, is that the reason we internally, and me specifically, really push using Swickle, the SolarWinds query language, as opposed to SQL, is pretty much version to version, we're making some small underlying database change. And the number of people who put reports out and say, hey, this report stopped working, well, that report was written in custom SQL. And it's like, yeah, that report stopped working because those tables and or views and or functions no longer exist. They have been changed. They have been deprecated out. And since it's underlying database, we're not keeping it. The stuff that's actually in Swickle Studio, I have not found anything that has been deprecated to my knowledge. There's probably been stuff over the years, but I have never found anything. I found some old verbs that have some really weird syntax, but have been kind of replaced with like slightly better ones, but the old ones are still there for backward compatibility.
Yeah. Yeah. That future proofing will save you worlds of pain. Having worked in some environments that have 10 or 15 custom SQL alerts and custom SQL reports, and then everything breaks and you're like, what happened? Yeah, no, that future proofing with SWCL is huge as an administrator. Huge.
Yeah. All right, so if we go with our example where we're looking for Windows nodes that are currently up that haven't been rebooted in a while, it's just like SQL. You just start adding stuff. In this case, the vendor is Windows. And yes, we acknowledge the vendor is not Windows. The operating system is Windows and the vendor is Microsoft. Forgive us, that's actually how the stuff came in over SNMP years ago. And we just kind of adopted it and kept it that way. That are currently up. In this case, status of 1 is up. And then this is kind of the more clever one. And this uses one of our functions. I wanted to call it out here, daydiff, which basically just looks at the number of days between 2 points. Like the last boot is probably in the past. In fact, by definition, it has to be in the past. And get UTC date is right now, this moment, right now. And if the number of days between them is less than 30, then that's what we wanted to see, rebooted in the last month. And then for me, I remove what's not needed. Like realistically, these two, they return the same thing. All I did was take out some stuff that I don't eventually want in the chart at the end, because that's the thing about the custom query. The custom query resource returns everything you return. It's not like a report where you can say, hide that field. It's going to return it all. So you have to be conscious of what you want. And this is where comments come in incredibly handy.
Yeah. I think too, for display purposes, for those of our viewers out there who may not be familiar with SWCL or SQL, that showing that your select is what values you're returning, but you can actually use in your where, in your filtering of your query, other fields that exist in that table is helpful if you don't have that background.
Yeah, you do not. Yeah, as long as it's addressable or referenceable, I can't think of the proper word for it. As long as you can talk and get information back on it,
Yep.
you can leave it. And then the last thing here, too many clicks, is that I put aliases in because, like, for you, me, probably most of the people on the chat, they know that caption is the name of the node, how it's defined in monitoring. But if you're building it for somebody else, I like node name or something similar. And then description, last boot is obvious, but maybe you want the space. Again, ialias, all kinds of stuff. The details URL one is _link for _node name. It does something clever in the query widget. You'll see it when we build it. But let's see what this one returns.
I just want to say that is really nice, because if we're talking about making things look pretty, just something as simple as a space between words makes all the difference in the world to how it looks.
Yeah. So if I run that one, well, that's nice. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, which I could have checked down here. It came back in 0.04 seconds. Thank you. They're all 2016 servers. Their last boots were earlier in August, and we have the link. And you're like, okay, well, if I copy and paste this right into a new thing, I'm going to get this. Or into a new query widget, that's what I'm going to see. Well, yeah, no. So if I'm going to go to, I think I have my little kind of scratch pad here. So I go to this one. I got this one here that I set up for the live cast. And just so everyone's aware, this is literally the exact same thing, and I'm going to prove it by just not pasting it in. I will paste it in. I got to get it from PowerPoint at the moment. My apologies. So we'll go ahead and paste that right in. Title, always good, comes up custom query by default. Subtitle, super helpful. Put in whatever you're filtering here, like what you're doing filter-wise. And then, as Crystal said, you can enable search. You can turn on pagination. I'd like both of them. The search lets you search for, it's a clever thing that people may know, but we're going to tell you. The search doesn't have to return a subset of what you're already querying. You can put a completely separate query here. I don't know that that's useful in all places, but it is possible. So if I do this and I hit submit, we had 4 fields before, but we only have 3 now. And the reason for that is that kind of macro for link for. And what that does is that brings in the node name, and you can see the names here, and these are sortable by clicking. And if I hover, again, you have the hover over. Now, this, for me, Crystal, is the big difference between this resource and the custom SQL query resources, that you can do these kinds of things.
Yep, definitely. If you were to use the same query in a custom table resource as opposed to a custom SWCL resource, there's certainly a few more drop downs to format and get that level of functionality. But just for anyone who mightn't be aware, Kevin, and at the risk of crashing your lab live, could we just show how to actually get that widget onto the view?
Of course. So you go to Add Widgets. I just look for Query, Custom Query, boom, done.
Nice.
And then once we're done editing, you'll see here it's incredibly boring, and that's where I said put the stuff in. So if I wanted the same query, but I wanted things that haven't reboot over 30 days, and I have no idea if I'm spelling this correctly, that's fine. You can all deal with me. But number of rows per page, hopefully this one will be much larger. Yeah, we've got 6 pages of these, and you can paginate through them.
Those pages.
All of the same hover over.
I also want to, sorry, I'm really excited about that. You have no idea how much real estate you get back on your dashboards from previously by having the pages in there. I also want to say you did illustrate the hover over, but it also links to the node details page. So when you're on the dashboard and you need to drill down, the drill down is right there. You just click on it.
Yeah, and it'll take you right to the node details page for that. You can see right there. Again, my lab overtaxed. There you go. It'll finish loading at some point. But that's the basics. And that is probably the simplest, easiest way to get the data you want in a way that is important for your audience. Now, what I like about that is we essentially built this top one, right? What I like about that is everything you just did, literally everything you did, can be used right in modern dashboards. And what's nice about that is you can just basically copy and paste it over. So if you haven't looked at modern dashboards, there are THWACK camp sessions on it. Tony did a fantastic post when it was first released a while ago. There is examples everywhere. There's an import and an export function, which is super interesting. And I really want people to start sharing those things on THWACK. So if we jump over and look, wrong one again, Kevin. If we go and look at our modern dashboards, we can just say, okay, let me go ahead and filter for modern. And in this case, this one is private by me. And there's the one built. Now, again, if I wanted to build this from scratch, just create a new one. And I configure it. And for me, I want to start with an empty one of table and customize it. And the data model, put in SWCL, paste, show records. That looks awful familiar, doesn't it?
Yep.
And
then
it's
it's just a
important to
matter
know
of
that he chose SWCL, but it's not required. You can still use the dynamic builder, just like you would in an alert or a report. You can still use it here.
Yeah, and essentially behind the scenes, what we're doing is we're giving you a graphical version of the SWCL. So you can say, I want stuff from nodes. I want caption. I want last boot. And I want, what was it, description? So we'll show all the properties, not that one. No, I'm going to have to do that. There it is. And description. And then add a filter where last boot is less than. And here's where you kind of lose some of the functionality because you can't call functions on filters and stuff like that, which is the reason we decided to do this example in SWCL Studio. You can kind of get clever here by maybe putting in get UTC date -30 or +30 or something like that, but it's kludgy and it's not easy for everybody. But if you just wanted to find something that was, let's say, where the caption starts with Windows, well, there you go. And then you can save that model. So you're not restricted. You don't have to have the SolarWinds query language skills to get started here. I like them.
Yeah.
Yep.
but that's because I've been working with it for a while. I would encourage everyone to work with it a little bit.
Yes.
But you can change this in any number of ways. My favorite is actually this property and formatting portion where I say, for this one, I want to turn this into a link. I know I can do an entity. I'm not doing that intentionally. The label is a node name and the URL is the link. And what do you know? That kind of looks similar. And then if I'm really being stickler, I don't need this anymore, so I don't have to show that column. And then last boot is a date time. I like this one. So it comes from last boot.
It's nice.
And give me the full version and replace today and yesterday with that. And then, of course, what you really should do is
Rename it.
give it a name, Toady, today. Wow, Kevin. You can have it jump out to another thing, which in basically after you save it, instead of the pencil icon, it'll have a little pop to new window icon. So you can actually have this target out to another either a resource or another page. And for me, I like the description because if I'm going to steal widgets that other people built, that's how I want to do it.
I think Toadie's really going to like this one.
Yeah.
The other beautiful thing about modern dashboards, but I don't think has been mentioned yet, is that you don't require any special permissions to make them.
Yeah.
You can just make them if you have an account.
Yeah. And basically they're all private. They're all like for me to start. And then after I'm like, I like this. This is good. You can actually flip that to a public view and then just send that link around to people and people can see it with you. One of the other ones that I like a lot, I feel so bad for doing this, Crystal, but I'm not going to apologize, is that you built an amazing KPI widget a while ago.
Well, I don't know why you feel bad about it. It's great.
Yeah. So this is the other thing I like a lot about the modern dashboards is I can totally steal other people's work. So she built, was it that one? Or was it SolarWinds Lab one? I think it was the TC suite. I think it was node status. That's the one.
That's the one.
I like that. I'm going to keep that and I'm going to steal it exactly as is. And that's it. So this is the thing where I'm kind of the mind is like, build really general ones to start. Like maybe even these filters for the Windows ones are too much. Build really general ones to start and then encourage people. Maybe you build a modern dashboard that you just call templates or widget templates and you can put cool stuff in there and just encourage people to copy them off there and then customize them for their own needs.
If you compare this alone with the first example of a dashboard, immediately I'm getting some indication there's maybe a hint of status. You know, those KPI widgets, they are status driven. They can change color based on warning and critical thresholds. But at a glance, you know, that as a dashboard is telling me something. I have a few items in a list of nodes and a count of different entities representing a different status.
Yeah. And that for me is one of the things. And we have example dashboards. Tony, I know you had your post that had like 5 or 6 and like showed you how to do the donut, which is always preferable to pie charts because who doesn't love a donut? And then you've got, of course, your line charts and your histograms. And those are very useful for certain things. For me, I like those for kind of counts, especially for things that are maybe I need to see this number continue to go down versus this other one. Like if I'm trying to deprecate an old model of something, just getting a model count of Cisco 2621s in my environment so I can watch that histogram go all the way down to 0. And then if it's only 1, I'm like, that's the one we got to replace yet. So time to pause.
We do.
What do we got?
Have some things.
Okay.
So I did want to mention 2 comments that made me laugh. One was that joins are my nemesis, which I thought was really funny when we were talking about SQL joins earlier. And then Mark Roberts said that the SWGL built-in navigation is the second biggest benefit of SWGL over SQL. I'd like to know what the first benefit is if you want to put it in the chat later. But questions. We had a question that says, are there any plans to move to the modern dashboards to be the view rather than keeping the classic views? So I assume that this question means like, are there plans to make modern dashboards available to be more like global views, like node details or whatever, if we can rebuild it in modern dashboards? I don't know what you can say about that, but if you have anything you'd like to say about that, you can.
I'll just say that, modern dashboards, we're taking an iterative approach with it. It is, early on in its model, right? The intention is to have other aspects of Orion summary views use the modern dashboard framework. I think the benefits of it are clear. It's easy to copy and borrow widgets rather than steal. The way it presents data, right, is an alternative to the classic views, and we should see entity level dashboards, if you will. I try to distinguish between the word dashboard and view when I'm looking at a single object. Whatever technology it's using, whether it's legacy or modern, I would refer to it as a view of that entity. And so certainly we're kind of keen to understand what areas of modern dashboards we can improve, what data models need to be represented to be displayed on at an entity level. But certainly there is a long-term vision for modern dashboards.
Excellent. Next question. So to use the link, it only works in widgets, not in reports. That's incorrect. It does also work in reports in the same fashion that Kevin showed for when he was building it for the modern dashboards, where you select it in the fields and then you add it as the details URL in your report. So it does also work there. Is there a way to make a KPI widget clickable to where the data comes from the count?
Ooh, so make it a drill down. So I click on this thing
and
and then shows the underlying filter.
Similar, I assume,
I'm feeling a kind of a dynamic URL there where the value in the KPI is used within the URL of the KPI widget, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, how you have like the built-in pie charts for like the application status or whatever, you can click into the pieces of the pie and it'll take you to a more detailed list. So I'm thinking this question stems from something like that. Like if I were to click on the down, would it take me to a list of down nodes? I don't think that's how it works now, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, let's take a quick glance. I don't think it is native right now because which is linked to another clone from, unlink, fine. So custom down, data model description, down color units. Nope, we don't have the ability. Now, also, I am one version behind. This lab is running on 2020.2.5. I know, egg on my face. I didn't upgrade it. I also don't think that's in there. The way I would cheat and get around this is I would build multiple singles and then go up here and put the URL here to whatever details page shows what you're looking for. It is obviously not what you're ultimately looking for. You're looking for a drill down, and my mind immediately goes to something like the Power BI stuff or the SQL Server reporting services where you click drill. Pretty sure that's the ask. I think there's already a feature request for that on the Orion platform on Thwack. If it's not, please put one there. I'll upvote it because I think it's something that's certainly worth investigating. Anything else sitting out there?
That is all the questions that I can see.
Well, we'll move on. How are we doing on time? Could be better, could be worse. All right. Crystal, this is all you. Talk to me about reports because you are the queen of reports as far as I'm concerned.
I love reports. So this kind of goes back to our previous discussion on alerts are not monitoring. It goes with that as well. Like reports are a good use case for when you need monitoring, but you don't need alerts, or when you need to know something once a week, but you don't need to know every time it happens, or things like that. I do think that there are something like, if you have all the products, there's something like 500 and something custom reports built out of the box that you can use as templates. And I want to stress this, cannot stress this enough. Use them as templates. They are good use case scenarios, but they're not filtered For the most part, they're not filtered. I think there are a couple that are like specific to Windows servers and things like that, but they're not typically filtered. They're not going to be helpful if you want to, but you can use that as a template. So you can say, hey, I have this custom property that's filtered by region or whatever, and use that to then further filter your data and make your data look good. I also want to say that even though we have that many out-of-the-box reports that you can use as templates, and there's also tons of content on Thwack. I've shared several things on Thwack. Lots of people share on Thwack. Hopefully everyone like me did put a note in there if they're using custom properties so that when it breaks in your environment, you can go change those things. But because if your custom properties are not the same as mine, then it will not work. It's just not how it works. But I will say also that while there are all those wonderful out-of-the-box reports, they don't necessarily all showcase all of the features that reporting can do, all of the lovely display things that you can do, from simple things like adding blank spaces between widgets to kind of break up your data sets, to even more complicated things, even display purposes, since we're talking about pretty things. You've got columns, you can break up your data in a bunch of different ways. There's a lot of visual options. There's a lot of built-in resources that you can add to your reports from other places in Orion. So if you really like that CPU widget, and there's a case for being on this report, you can add it on there. And then you also have all the capabilities of doing more customization if you wanted to get more advanced and adding in kind of HTML changes. And there's some cool things that I've seen done out there. Shout out to the MVPs and shout out to people that I worked with in my previous job, because there have been some really cool visual reports that you can make that just pop in, like when your CIO or whoever gets this report and they can see, oh, it's not just numbers, it's got a red or a green or whatever. I can see right away, that's bad. I know that's bad because it's red. We don't like to see red things. Why is this red? Whoever's getting those things, that visual distinction can make all the difference in the world to how that data is perceived. Because, you don't want to set up a report or an alert or anything that's going to get ignored. Why do I build this for you if you're going to relegate it to an inbox or the trash or anything like that? So,
And that leads directly to this. Take the time. Because as there are a couple people that are report writers, but generally they are the higher level Orion administrators, generally speaking. And because of that, you're building on behalf of other people. Take the time to draw it out. I cannot stress this enough, especially now with the multi-part and multi-layout you can get in a report. So one report can essentially be a weekly version of a dashboard replacement for someone who doesn't need to log in. Please take the time to talk with them. Because the worst thing is, and I've done it, Tony, I know you told me a story about people building reports that no one wanted. And Crystal, you and I have gone around in circles about customers we've spoken to who are like, yeah, I built this thing. It took me 14 hours. It was great. It had all these things and they never use it. Why? Because it doesn't have it in the way they're looking for it.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I also think to those who might be watching that may be thinking, I don't have time. They need a report right now, and here's the data, and throw it at them and be done. That's fine for if you're trying to solve a problem right now. Right now, you need this information. I'm going to build you a report, whatever. But take the time to go back later and make those adjustments. After they've used it, they've solved whatever problem they needed it for right now. If this is like a more ongoing thing that they're going to need that information for, talk to them about how it could be better, how they could get more information out of it, how they can see this where they're going to know right away if this is a more regular thing that they need, because it can make the difference. It can really make the difference in solving those problems. And especially, I think, when you make things pop in them, the more important details where you can just glance at it and say, that is the thing. And that's in dashboards and reports and whatever. If that thing pops, that this is going to be the problem area or whatever, I need to know this right away. That can make all the difference in the world for response time on resolving things. If you've got a dashboard or you have a report or whatever that you get every week and it has data in it and that data is important, but you just kind of glance over it, I mean, you can miss things. And now you're taking 30 minutes later, somebody's complaining about something that you should have seen in that data that you already looked at. make it pop.
And I will say there is a known limitation about the reports that come out of the box, and that's because any of the Orion Platform products can be installed solo. So there's very, very rarely links between two products. Like you won't necessarily get NPM data and SAM data in the same report because people can have one or the other. And if we ship a report that needs both, then the report won't work for anybody. And that's where I really lean on like Thwack to find those kinds of things.
Yes.
Let's see. What else do we have to cover? Because we're running short. Alerts. If you want to customize alerts, go. Go for it. Love it. Own it. They are amazing. Yeah, it's going to be the same kind of thing. Talk to the people about what you want. Come up with a layout. Do you want to use a table? Do you want these things? If you want to do HTML and CSS, there are examples that are on Thwack. These are just the short links for them. They'll all be in the resources. One is by me, where I went way too deep. Another one is by one of the MVPs, Silverback Says. And then one of the things that I've used, and there's 2 documents on, is the unofficial guide to integrating with Slack. And then there's the also unofficial guide of integrating with Teams. They both basically do the same thing. They're webhooks that push a JSON card format, just a specific format, and then it just displays in whatever channel you're working with. Custom HTML widgets, I've seen people do amazing stuff. Like mind-numbingly amazing stuff, like calling the Google graphing APIs and importing and pulling in, the jQuery stuff to do these, like absolutely amazing. There's some nuance there, ways you have to work with it, but if you know basic HTML, I'm gonna go back to like the absolute cheater way that I've done stuff in the past is, I'm done editing, thank you. Let's see, home. Now it's going to bite me because I won't remember which one. Oh yeah, there. Absolutely dumb. This seems trivial, but a list of links is not a trivial thing to have on a page. And this is, what is this, like 3 lines of HTML? 1, 2, 3, yeah. That's it. You can do this, especially if you want to go ahead and make this available to other people, or you want to put it, or the example I had for the environment I came from is we had kind of an application summary page for a specific identity management tool. And they were like, but for new people, they get to see this and see if it's a problem, but then I got to use my favorites to get the identity tool. I'm like, what's the URL? And they gave me the URL. I was like, there, just pay, and it just stayed on the top of that page. So they're like, oh, there's a problem. I need to actually look at it. Click, pop to a new window, and they could continue working.
Yeah, it's amazing those like little simple things that don't take up a lot of real estate, but the difference that they can make in your workflow. And that's what we're about, making it faster, making it easier on everyone. Because if we can solve our problems faster, then everyone will be happier.
Yeah.
If we had more time, Kevin, we'd probably talk about macros within the custom HTML widget too.
Being able to use the $curly. And then name and curly. I have used that. Yeah. I will not lie. I've used that also within, you can do the same thing with the custom queries. If you put them on something like a no details page, you can pull in.
Yep.
I did a very simple one to pull stuff from Log Analyzer to show me just the last 10 logs that came from this device, and it just sat at the top, and I could just scroll through, or probably 100 because I had pagination. Nice. You could just scroll through and be like, yeah, none of that's concerning, so nah. So resources, if you want to screenshot this and go to these links, by all means, they're all going to be in the show wrap-up notes, which should be probably tomorrow, day after at most. So we've talked about, for me, there was the SDK 101 session, which was PowerShell and the SDK, basically how to get data out. There was reports that Crystal did with Leon there, and then I did one on customizing the Orion platform, showing this stuff, but in a more detailed way, very specific to a certain scenario. And then I also did very simple modern dashboards, which actually there's some new features in the .6 version that I didn't cover because that was a while ago. So read the release notes or ask on Thwack. And then last Thwack Camp, Crystal and I did an absolutely ridiculous session about how to write alerts that get noticed using HTML and CSS, and Crystal talked about how to do dashboard tuning specifically for your audiences.
Tony was there for that.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. It is the two of you. My apologies.
Yeah.
And that's it. We're ready for more questions. Now's the time. Ask the questions. Hopefully we've answered most of them, but
we love it. This has been really fun. And as you can tell by all of those resources, which involve one or more of us, we like talking about this stuff. So, please ask us questions and please use Thwack. The forum is wonderful. There's so much customization to be found there. If you don't know, or if you'd like to get inspiration, there are multiple threads out there where it's like, show us your dashboards, and people have all these dashboard ideas posted in there. And if you're looking for inspiration, or you're just not sure of anything, or you need help or whatever, the forum is incredible. I cannot say enough. And I can't say enough about our PM team and our Thwack MVPs being super involved, always on Thwack. And it's great. And I love it. And it's a wonderful place. And I miss being an MVP myself. I lost my title, but that's okay. I get to be a head geek now, so I guess it's okay. But it is wonderful, and I do encourage you to check out the Report Lab and the Alert Lab and the SDK Forum, because those are all great places to find customization examples and ask your questions if you have them, or if you're having struggles while writing a query, you can't quite figure out that linkage or whatever. Tons of people out there to answer those questions. Mm-hmm. The only question I see that's new is, where do you set pagination on the widget?
On which widget? So if we're talking about on the widget on the custom query on a classic view, there's actually a number when you edit it, and it says basically how many things to show. And I'm pretty sure the modern dashboards just does it based on the size you squish. But now they made me curious, and now I have to know. So let's go through it together.
You're right. The Swickle, custom Swickle, it defaults to 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's on there by default, right? You don't have to add it. It's just changing the number per page.
Okay. All right. I'll bite. Where is it?
We have virtual scroll and lazy loading for the table widget. So you might need to load up a little bit more data.
Okay. Oh, it's probably based around this. All right. Well, what example did I use? Switch this direction. Should get, yeah, there we go. Pages. Save. Done. So yeah, this one will show you as much as you have. Now again, this might be an option there to, you've got the search version behind there as well. So we will take that question offline and answer it on the forums when I have a definitive answer. I don't want to speak poorly here. Anything else? There will be a poll coming out. We plan on continuing this livecast series through the end of the year and probably into the new year. So please answer the poll. Let us know what you want us to show you. We really enjoy them. It feels like we're actually having a chance to actually have a conversation with people again, which a lot of us have missed.
Yeah. We were just talking about missing Swug like 5 minutes before starting this podcast. Yeah.
All right. Any final words of wisdom for our attendees?
Don't be scared to try things. Set yourself up a test dashboard or something and go mess with stuff. Don't be afraid to try it.
Except manage views.
Yes.
Don't go deleting widgets off views.
And with that wonderful note, I'm Kevin Sparenberg for Crystal and Tony. Thank you for joining us for this Thwack Livecast.